there's a reason why I'm here today. There's a purpose in my life, and I can trace it all the way back to my time in the Marine Corps. I think that, everybody is broken in some way, shape, or form. Everybody is.
Yeah.
You're not full of happiness all the time, but it's how you develop relationships and how you water those relationships like they're flowers. You've got to take care of those relationships and have people around you that you can go to when you are in need. If I was to commit suicide, this is a true event in my life, is what's going to happen to my son?
Yeah.
How is my son going to view me? Who's going to be there for him when he needs a father figure the most? Really helps me not think about myself, not think about the problems that I've experienced or the hardships that I'm going through right now. If people want to know things about veterans and want to know what war is like, just ask. And I think as veterans, we owe that to them, the people that we actually serve, an explanation for what things were like.
The views and opinions in this podcast do not represent the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, or United States Marine Corps.
After their deployment in 2008, some called them the Forgotten Battalion. But the Marines and sailors of the United States Marine Corps' 2nd Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment reject the way the Forgotten Battalion moniker encourages that narrative of broken veterans. Instead, these warriors simply want to be remembered for the mission they accomplished and for the honor with which they have served their country and their Corps. The majority of 2-7 veterans continue to reflect on their experiences while living their lives and pressing forward. These are their personal stories of resilience, with insight to healthy coping and living with hope. Welcome to the Warriors Roundtable. Today we talk to former 2-7 Marine and saw gunner Travis Kiser. Travis, the last time we saw each other was about 2 weeks ago in 29 Palms, and you were lighting it up with the new infantry assault rifle, the M27. How was that for you?
That was awesome. I really enjoyed the ability to shoot a fully automatic weapon again. And I took full advantage of every round that I could.
Yeah.
Because back here in Texas, that's going to be like, for 10 rounds, you're going to spend like $10. So I made sure to get my money's worth out of shooting the M27. And it was fun. It was great seeing the advances that the Marine Corps is making.
What was the weapon itself like to shoot? Because were you a saw gunner?
Yeah, I was a saw gunner.
Okay.
So the weapon was obviously lighter than the saw.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that about it, but I didn't like the fact that it doesn't hold as many rounds, and constantly you're going to have to be reloading a lot. So
yeah,
in that aspect, I didn't like it, but it's a very accurate weapon, very accurate.
So I guess the whole kind of theory is trading the volume of firepower for more accurate, though fewer rounds.
Yeah,
with your fully automatic.
I hear what they're saying, but it's, I still like the whole idea of suppressive fire, and volume of fire is going to keep the enemy's head down other than accuracy, in my opinion.
Well, you've had some experience, obviously a lot of experience with the saw, especially in I know you did a tour in 2008 to Afghanistan with 2-7. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the Marine Corps. You're out of the Marine Corps now, but tell us a little bit about what you did while you were in the Marine Corps, and then we'll dive maybe more into what you did with 2-7 in 2008.
Yeah, I was sent to boot camp in 2005 at MCRD San Diego. I graduated a week before the Marine Corps birthday, and then went to Camp Pendleton for infantry school. And then from there, I didn't leave infantry school until April, and I was sent out to beautiful 29 Palms, and many fun training experiences with 2-7 Fox, and then was sent to Iraq in 2007 into Saqlawiya. We were there for 7 months, and then we came back home for about 6 months before we deployed to Afghanistan.
Okay.
And still to this day, I don't recall having a lot of free time. And that was something that was crazy going back to 29 and seeing all the Marines are all muscled up and like their ability to go to the gym, and I was like, I didn't feel like we ever had free time. If you were going out to a range Monday afternoon, you weren't coming back till Thursday. Now there probably were a couple of weeks where we didn't have training like that, but I don't feel like the training was toned down. We got a lot of good training in.
Yeah.
I feel like if anything, they just tried to get us to go up into the mountains more. But where we were at in Afghanistan, we didn't really need that. But
Okay. So how much time roughly do you think in those 6+ months you had home, how much time would you say you were actually out in the field versus home?
at least, in a month, maybe 3 weeks, we were out in the field. I don't recall exact details, but I just felt like we were always out in the field.
Yeah.
And that's how it was before we went to Iraq too. I mean, we had great leadership that looked into getting us as much range time as we can, and that's the blessing of being out at 29 is that you can go to the range and shoot live ammunition every day of the week if your company wants you to.
Right.
So that was awesome.
Speaking of 29, one last question about our trip there a couple of weeks ago. So, one of the great things about 29 Palms is, for those who've never been there, you literally go over that ridge on the back side of, we'll call it main side of where the base is. And from that ridge, you can see some of the combat towns and ranges, and you can get to the ranges really, really quickly and feel like all of a sudden, boom, you're over in Afghanistan or something similar. So they celebrated 2/7 by doing that Ripper run early in the morning that first day. What was that like for you to go back up the ridge in the sand and in the early morning hours and do that run with 2/7?
It was great. I've kind of gotten soft since I've been out of the Marine Corps.
Right.
And, for one thing, I coach swimming, so I hate when my feet get wet and I hate like being uncomfortable. But as soon as we kicked off that run, I had sand in my shoes, sand on my legs, and I didn't care anymore. I was just like surrounded by friends, back in the old stomping grounds. And, it was great. I'm not in running shape, but I wasn't the first one up at the top of the hill, and I wasn't the last one. So I'll take that as a win. And there were some 2-7 guys the current 2-7 guys that I beat up Sugar Cookie. And that's probably because I had a little more experience running up Sugar Cookie in my grunt days than they did.
Yeah. I love how they put those signposts in the desert that have the description of all the battles that 7th Marines has been through, and they renamed Sugar Cookie Fox Hill after Fox 2/7 from Korea. So that was really special. I really enjoyed that.
That's really cool. I mean, that's something that anytime I go anywhere where they have like a monument to the Marine Corps or the Navy, let's say like I was in Annapolis 2 summers ago, and at their football stadium for the Naval Academy, they have all the battles that the Navy Marine Corps has been in. And it's so cool to sit there and say, even though it just says the words Iraq or Afghanistan, to say that that's something I was a part of. And I really like that. And I don't know if the Marines that are currently in the Marine Corps right now would really appreciate that, like the signs, as much as people like us did, because as a regimental commander told us, he takes his kids up there and shows them, hey, this is what we've done.
Yeah.
And that's really awesome, especially coming from an enlisted guy who never wanted to be around the battalion commander or the regimental commander at all, ever, let alone be on the run with them.
Yeah.
mean, it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear. Travis, let's talk a little bit about 2008. Where were you specifically in Afghanistan? Not just with what company or what platoon, but where geographically were you and what were you guys doing?
So we were in Musa Qala, Afghanistan, which geographically it's right along what people call the green zone. There's like a major wadi riverbed that goes from north to south, pretty much in the middle of Helmand Province.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were right along that wadi, Sangin and Marja. Those places are far down to the south. Nowzad was to the west. To the west of us, correct, across the desert. And then Kajaki was, over the mountain that we had in Musa Qala, a little bit more to the north.
Okay.
In Musa Qala, we had 70 guys. I was with second platoon, and we had some attachments. So second platoon plus attachments, and I was an attachment pretty much as an extra body. I would be going out on patrol with some of the squads. I would go do resupply missions. I would be in charge of taking accountability for supplies that we got in. I responded to mass casualties and helped train some of the Afghan police that we had.
Okay.
Stood post. I mean, just did whatever was told of me to do. But our job there in Musa Qala was to continue the security of that town. And Musa Qala had like a historical importance for the British that were there while we were there. Because back in 2006, they had lost Musa Qala. They had been pushed out of it, essentially. And they came back, took it over into December of 2007, I want to say, with the Army, the 82nd Airborne. They came in and did a massive sweep, and we set up shop in the district center. But, we were 2-7 should be proud that we were the first Marines to actually hold ground in Helmand Province. And I think that's something that the Marine Corps really doesn't give us enough credit for, but I'm not paying too much attention to what the rest of the Marine Corps did. I was just, really fascinated with the history of Musa Qala, Nowzad, in that area because it shaped into what our deployment was like. So.
Since you worked so closely with the British in Musa Qala, did you notice a distinct difference between the way that they did business, so to speak, their TTPs, their techniques, tactics, procedures, and the way the Marine Corps did things? And if so, what was that difference like?
One of the main things that comes to my head is the rules of engagement,
Okay.
ROEs. As I recall, the British had to actively be receiving fire in order to shoot back.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong. That's just the Lance Corporal Underground talking back then. But I do recall there were times like they would spot people digging and they couldn't do anything because they weren't receiving any hostile action. Whereas if we saw the same thing, people digging in the middle of the wadi at night with a large bag next to them, that's an IED. It was just very weird being around the British who had been there for so long and, feeling like we had less restrictions than they did on what they could do, where they could go. I don't recall the British going out as much as we did, but then again, that could have just been me being ignorant to what was going on in the big picture of things.
Sure.
But it was great working with the British. I'm glad they were there. They were great men and women, and it was a pleasure serving with people that are from a different nation. You get a whole different perspective on life, and that you're a part of something that's way bigger than just the United States when the British and the Estonians were involved. I know that in Nowzad they had a lot more Estonian help than we did. I think we only had one
Right.
that was Estonian with us.
And it sounds like a similar kind of difference that you just highlighted in Musa Qala, where the other forces, the other nations had rules of engagement that did not allow them to do what the Marine Corps, that quite frankly, your mission is as a grunt. The Marine Corps infantry: locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. Whereas they were a bit more, I think, reactive. So they could allow the Marines to take lead, to take point in an operation or an engagement, and obviously as soon as you take fire, now it's game on. So I think they enjoyed having the Marines there. Kind of maybe freed them to be warfighters and do what they were there to do.
Yeah, they definitely liked our food more. I mean, I will always remember them walking over from their bivouac area to ours whenever we would get a resupply and try to, bum some Dr. Peppers off of us or
Nice.
MREs. I mean, and we tried theirs and we had their chow too, and they love curry. I just remember eating a lot of curry and having stomach issues after that. But, yeah, it was a great experience. Something that didn't happen in Iraq.
Huh.
So
Maybe just the novelty of having something different. So being able to kind of share each other's meals just broke up the monotony of the day to day.
absolutely.
Travis, tell us a little bit, if you would, about either an event that kind of sticks out in your mind or something that keeps coming back to you, something that has particular meaning to you as you think back upon your deployment to Afghanistan in 2008.
I like to think of my first combat engagement as something that really defined my entire Marine Corps service. I joined the Marines for adventure, as most middle class white children do. Is they want adventure. They want something more than what they have at home.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was a teacher for 5 years, and I tell all the kids that are thinking about the military, get a job, get a real job that you can take out into the civilian world with you. Don't just be infantry to have fun. You'll have fun, but come out of it with a job. But anyways, we had to go down south in the Wadi, and then an F-18 had dropped a bomb, and that bomb didn't go off, and they had eyes on locals going towards the bomb. And, at first we thought, okay, they're going to turn that into an IED and we can't have it or use it in some way against us. So, with British, we got in a long convoy and we headed south. It was cool because we knew we were going to get contact. Mm-hmm. We knew that was a huge possibility. And we had heard about it in Iraq where, you're going to get contact when everybody's leaving or it's quiet out. And we saw that in Afghanistan. You saw people leaving in caravans, and you could hear stuff over the radio about, they have eyes on us, and, wait for the attack or whatnot. And, that was a truly awesome experience. I mean, for some people, it was a life-changing experience. I mean, my really good friend, Sean Casper, was wounded by an RPG. So was Posner, and this one of the combat camera guys was actually injured too. I remember people, talking about dropping mortars onto the Taliban, and then Apaches coming in, and it was like CAX all over again. It was a huge combined arm exercise where we had mortars dropping, we had Apaches, we had a B-1 bomber come over.
Oh, wow.
It was really awesome. And I just will never forget how excited I was to finally be able to engage with the enemy with suppressive fire, not accurate, but suppressive fire. And then it also kind of, even now, I always think about God has a plan for me, and things happen for a reason. Because when we were at that engagement, I was told by the staff sergeants that I was to get out of the vehicle to provide cover and security for any dismounts. So anybody that got out of their vehicles. And Kiser, Posner, and the combat cameramen climbed down the ladder of the 7-ton and got out. And then I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to be their security element on the ground, but I stayed in the vehicle, and they got hit by the RPG. And the RPG threw me into the vehicle as well. And, I always think back about, well, my life could be a lot different if I had just walked down some stairs. I mean, to think about that really long and hard is that things happen for a reason. There's a reason why I didn't walk down those stairs. There's a reason why that I didn't go with 1st Platoon, which is who I was with on my first deployment. And, when I start thinking about things that are negative about my life, I always kind of look back on that and say, there's a reason why I'm here today. There's a purpose in my life, and I can trace it all the way back to my time in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's a very optimistic, healthy way of looking at processing through part of your combat experience in a way that just continues to make you stronger and healthier today. Tell us a little bit more maybe about that particular engagement. Obviously, that's your first combat engagement. It sticks out to you. You kind of described it broadly, sort of like it was like a CAX experience with, air power coming in, indirect fire, and as well as everything you guys are doing on the ground. So it sounds like when Casper and Posner got hit, that was sort of at the beginning of the whole engagement. And take us maybe through that, if you don't mind, a little bit more as far as how that flushed out afterwards.
So as I said, we were driving down the Wadi, and the Wadi is a dry riverbed. So there is still water in it and mud puddles, and there's a little more like a creek than it is a river at that time of the year. And our 7-ton got stuck. And there was nothing that we had that could pull that 7-ton out. And so we had Casper, Posner, and some other people get out because they were going to try to hook up a tow strap to it. And as we came to experiences, that was in Musa Qala, that was when the Taliban loved to attack. I mean, it was a prime advantage for them where troops are stuck in the Wadi. They're all gathered around a vehicle. So then, if I recall correctly, they were dropping mortars first. And one of those mortars kind of hit closer to Staff Sergeant Hernandez's vehicle. And we were kind of just looking around, waiting for stuff. And then that's when an RPG and small arms fire started coming in. And I recall it was an RPG, and they were trying to hit the 7-ton, because the 7-ton where I was at had, several other Marines in the back, like at least 8 others in the back of that vehicle. And if you could manage to hit the top of the troop carrier, they would have really hurt a lot of us in the back of that 7-ton. Yeah. And, there was Taliban running around. I recall seeing a guy in a white man dress running between buildings and shooting at him. He would pop out around the corner and shoot an AK at us. And I recall just trying to suppress him and shoot where he might be or end up next. So that would be shooting windows, at doors. And, people might say, well, you don't know what you're shooting at. You might have hurt innocent civilians. And I didn't worry about that, because in Afghanistan at that time, the civilians were leaving. They were all leaving the scene. They had taken their valuables with them in a long caravan. And they knew we were coming. The Taliban knew we were coming. And so, once we got into contact, I don't recall how long it was, but it felt like a long time. And there was Apaches that came in. Our mortar team dropped a mortar on a Taliban guy that was hiding behind a wall, apparently. And we ended up getting the 7-ton pulled out of the mud. One of the British vehicles came by and pulled us out. And then, the 7-ton's tires had been destroyed. So it was immobile. It was completely immovable. And so we had to be drugged back home. And I I remember coming back into the fob, and as we were doing that, I want to say it was a French Mirage or it would have been a Marine Corps Harrier, did a show of force, which is so awesome to see a jet like that fly over you really low off the deck and drop flares. I just remember everybody cheering. It was awesome. It was what we had signed up for.
Now, Casper and Posner, if I recall correctly, they actually ended up coming out of that particular firefight with all their limbs and alive. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Even the cameraman Stats, he was brought back up into the 7-ton. And the corpsman that was up there, he was treating him, and he had shrapnel to the face. It wasn't bad. It wasn't stuff like I'd seen in Iraq where it was massive damage to a body part or extreme bleeding from the head or anything like that. It was they got really lucky. They got really lucky, and I'm so thankful that happened that they were not destroyed.
Yeah, and you were able to jump. Say again. I'm sorry.
That's not a great way to say it. They weren't destroyed, but they weren't too terribly hurt from it.
Yeah.
They both, Casper and Posner, both went home.
Right.
And Katz, I think, did too. Stats did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you were able to, despite getting blown back, you weren't knocked out. You're able to jump up and continue to suppress the enemy who otherwise could have continued to take the fight to your Marines in a way that was devastating in its own right. So, there's so many things about that one incident that definitely give you a sense of God's hand of providence on you all. So that's great to hear. We certainly mourn the guys we lose, but we celebrate opportunities like that where we can not only take the fight to the enemy, but come back, with everybody in one piece, physically, more or less. A lot of times when we're sitting alone in the quietness of our thoughts, that's when some of the more challenging memories come back, or the harder memories come back. Is there anything in particular that keeps coming back to you when you have those moments when you're sitting with your own thoughts?
Just feeling helpless. When I say helpless, I wasn't in any real danger, or the people that I was with weren't directly in any danger, but 2-7 was so spread out, and you would hear reports of, okay, we're on River City, can't call home, can't use the internet. Somebody has passed away, and you're sitting there scrambling, trying to think about who it is and what happened. There was other times where I was on radio watch when Captain Trahoon and Whitaker were killed, and listening to them saying things like, he's back alive, or nope, he's dead now, he's back alive, and just feeling like you can't do anything, and that you wish you could be there to help your brothers out, even though you may not know them so well. But then the ones that you do know, it really hits your heart when you just hear their name.
Yeah.
You know that they're dead. You can't do anything about it, and you have to go on about your day. Sure, you can mourn them, but at the end of that mourning time, you still have to go back to work. And that still kind of affects me today, where, my grandparents, when my grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, I didn't want to go to the funeral. I didn't want to dwell on his passing. I wanted to remember his life, but I also wasn't there for my mother. So I kind of felt bad. I really still kind of feel bad that I wasn't there. But I just view death in a different manner now. And Afghanistan really did that to us.
Yeah.
Especially to me, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to grieve. It's part of what allows you to kind of release that. And yet you were in a place and in a situation where you could not do that. I mean, you had to keep that stuff kind of tucked away in its own box until you had time to actually process it, because you had to, I'm sure, turn around and head back out on another convoy or patrol the next day, right?
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. There's a great quote in a book, I don't know if you've ever read it, called The Truth About PTS with a small d, by Chad Robichaud and Jeremy Stallnecker. They're the guys that run Mighty Oaks. But there's a great quote in here. He says that trauma isn't a combat thing; it's a life thing. You know, that people often look at veterans as broken, and really they are normal people who are shouldering an abnormally heavy burden, and honestly probably doing really well with it. Um, but what do you think about those who often kind of refer to or think about 2-7 as the forgotten battalion, and they kind of, you know, in some of those contexts, they'll thinking folks outside of 2-7 in particular, you know, they often kind of talk about how broken veterans are. What would be your response to that?
Well, I think everybody, as you said, it's a PTSD is a life thing. I think everybody, excuse me, has PTSD. Ours is just more pronounced, and it's probably being in a stressful situation was happening more to us than it does the average person walking on the street. Let's say that you and I were never in the military. Okay. I get in a car wreck.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, okay, I was texting and driving or whatnot. I will always remember that car wreck. That's a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
But if I hamper myself and I stop driving cars because of that incident, then I'm losing value with my life.
True.
I think everybody has PTSD. We are just allowed to express it more than others.
Mm.
I think that, I mean, everybody is broken in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Everybody is.
Yeah.
You're not full of happiness all the time. But it's how you develop relationships and how you water those relationships like they're flowers.
Yeah.
You've got to take care of those relationships and have people around you that you can go to when you are in need.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about us being a forgotten battalion, I mean, even though a couple weeks ago we were being told and everybody was saying that we aren't forgotten, it's great. I mean, it's great to hear, but in my head and in the other veterans' heads that were in 2-7, I mean, part of me is saying, what more should I expect? What do I need 2-7, the Marine Corps, the U.S. to do so that they remember 2-7? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. I don't need a parade on the 4th of July just for 2-7. I mean, what more can I ask for from other people other than just sharing a story and things like this, and being interviewed for books and guys writing about their books. I mean, their experiences, sorry. I think that's a way to never be forgotten.
Yeah.
Putting down your thoughts onto paper, putting it out there for others to see.
Yeah.
Is a way that you'll never be forgotten. I mean, if you really want to get down to brass tacks on this, look at the World War I veterans. There's no more of them.
Yeah.
Are they forgotten? No. I mean, we have accounts of what they've done. We have people that we still revere that fought in World War I, and the same thing with World War II.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take time to remember those things, yeah, they will be forgotten.
Mm.
You know, and I like to think that 2-7 will have its place in history one day. I mean, like I said, I don't know what that should look like. I don't think it should be a movie. I don't think it should be anything sort of crazy like that, because that's kind of like something I really enjoy about being part of 2-7 is that mystique of we were the first ones in Helmand Province to actually stake our claim.
Yeah.
And everything else that came after that for Helmand is because of us. You know, the reason why Marja is so well known is because 2-7 went in there and kicked the hornet's nest.
Yeah.
And we shoved all those terrorists and Taliban down into Marja.
Mm-hmm.
Why did Nowzad get cleared so quickly? Well, that's because after 2-7 was there, the Marine Corps realized that you can't just put 2 platoons there.
Right.
You've got to do more. And look at Sangin. I mean, Sangin had the same thing where they were less than a company was at that place, and they stuck a whole battalion in Sangin, Afghanistan.
It's interesting you should mention that. I just talked to a Marine. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. Was it 3-5 that came in after 2-7?
We had 3-8.
3-8. Oh, that's right. And then I think he was with one of the battalions from 5th Marines that I want to say he was with 1-5, but I could be misremembering. But he came in and he said the same thing. You know, he's like, yeah, we were there with pretty much a battalion, and he couldn't believe that 2-7 had been in Sangin and Nowzad, Musa Qala, Gulistan, all these places, you know, as a single battalion spread out as platoons. You could say as companies, but like you were saying, even the companies weren't were never or rarely at full strength. So that's
it's kind of like what Bing West went through when he was in Vietnam. You know, there's a book that they made us read called The Village, which talks about, you know, platoons being out in the middle of enemy territory or Indian country and having to deal with the locals, you know, and it is kind of a ego thing for a lot of Marines, I would think, but you know, it's cool to sit there and say, well, look what you guys did with all of the stuff that you had, these new vehicles, plate carriers, you know, air support, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
If the British helicopters weren't able to fly that day, we couldn't go out on patrol in Musa Qala.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And it's kind of a egotistical thing to say, but it's also a source of pride. And I think other Marines at 2-7 should look at it as a proud thing, is that we did so much with so little, which is kind of the Marine Corps story in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, every new grunt that uses the brand new infantry assault rifle will certainly be mindful of 2-7 every time they pick that weapon up. Hopefully they make that part of their the stories that they tell. And what do we call it when like in McMap, when you have the little the breakouts, the little lectures in between?
Oh yeah, the little hip pocket classes.
Yeah, you know, I'm hopeful that they will talk about 2-7 and specifically, even though the infantry assault rifle, the M27, was field tested in Iraq, it was still 2-7. Hopefully they'll tell the stories of what was done in Afghanistan as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, this, you know, I appreciate you being willing to talk from your heart about your experience, because I think this is part of that venue to help folks know what you all went through. And I think there's a lot of people who can relate and draw points of contact with their own experience. And like you said, trauma is, people who have never been to combat still can experience trauma, whether that's getting T-boned by a car or whether that's you know, a young person experiencing abuse or sexual trauma or whatever. And there's a lot of points of contact with what we're talking about to, I think, even those things. Speaking of which, how have you continued your narrative so that trauma doesn't define you? It's part of who you are, but it doesn't define you, that you've gone on to grow. How have you utilized other resources or people to help you continue to move forward from your experience as a Marine?
Yeah, that's a great question. Resource wise, I use people as my resource. What I mean by that is we joined the Marine Corps to be a part of something that's bigger than us. And you know, when we leave, we kind of feel like we're not a part of something big.
Mm.
I think you have to go make that feeling happen again when you get out of the Marines.
Mm.
You've got to find a way to serve other people, help other people out. I mean, that's what life is all about, is helping others, and they'll help you. That's why I really fell in love with coaching and teaching, and is being able to help others accomplish their goals and their dreams.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that the Marine Corps taught me, was selfless service, putting others before you. And I think when you leave, you don't feel like you have that purpose. So when Marines get out, they need to look at their children. They need to look at their classmates or their spouse as somebody that they can help, because that's huge. That's actually a huge thing that has gotten me through some difficult times, is just remembering that, okay, if I was to commit suicide, this is a true event in my life, is what's going to happen to my son?
Yeah.
How is my son going to view me? Who's going to be there for him when he needs a father figure the most? And, that kind of helped me a lot. And, I just try to find a way that I can bring value to any situation that I'm in, and really helps me not think about myself, not think about the problems that I've experienced or the hardships that I'm going through right now. It's been great. It's definitely made me feel like I have more of a purpose now in life.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're saying is it's not that you avoid thinking or even talking about what you've been through. It's more so that you choose to frame it in a positive way. I mean, even talking about what happened that day that that you got blown back in the 7-ton, realizing that it could have gone far, far worse, and you choose to look back on that with gratitude. The fact that you continue with doing acts of compassion and service and pouring into others, like with your swim coaching at Texas A&M, those things help, I believe, kind of restore our humanity when sometimes you come back from combat feeling like maybe you lost a piece of that, and that kind of helps bring you back. Processing through thoughts of suicide and thinking not so much woe is me, but thinking of, well, how is this going to affect my son, my family, others that care for me, and that kind of getting you through that valley till you can come out on the other side and look back and go, okay, that was clearly a dark kind of moment or season, but obviously you made the right choice, and you can begin to experience joy. And you talked a bit about your family, and I know you've told me before of how they play a role, and you talked about a little bit a minute ago about how they play a role in your own sort of growth and health. Can you talk a little bit about your wife, your daughter?
Oh, they are absolutely a central part of my life. I can't thank my wife and my daughter enough for allowing me to do the things that I do, for being there, for supporting me. And they're also the reason why I work as hard as I do, because I want to provide for them. And so they've given me a lot of purpose. I mean, if you don't have a daughter, you don't understand, and I know you do, but it's just nothing like coming home and having your little girl so excited to see you. She can't help but like dance or moving crazy ways that a 2-year-old does.
Right.
Which is something that I will always cherish, and I think others should find something like that in their lives to be excited to come home to. My family has been supportive of everything I've done. And they're there for me when I've needed help. They helped me to go seek help if they can't. They're great.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You mentioned too earlier that part of your processing what happened in that first combat engagement was just realizing, God has a plan. How does faith play a role in your life now?
Faith is something that I'm trying to get back into,
Okay.
and that's a lot on me about how I've neglected church and neglected reading from the Bible, but I know that it's a huge part of my life,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to continue to be not only a part of my life, but for my wife and my daughter.
Yeah.
So actually, I've accepted a job um, at a college in North Carolina, Gardner Webb, which is a Baptist university, Southern
Okay.
Baptist University. And one of the main things has attracted me to that place is that there's strong religious connections. Their coach, when he took me around for a tour, and we went to lunch, prayed over our food. And that's something that I hadn't done in a long time. And it felt great to finally be doing that again.
Mm.
It's, it kind of always draws back to having a sense of purpose in your life.
Yeah.
And religion does help with that a lot, helping others to live a better life, seeking self-improvement as well.
Mm.
These are all values that I know that I'll find with religion, finding a greater sense of purpose and ability to improve myself and others around me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all want to live our life with meaning, and that's something that we had or have when we're on active duty, or especially when we're deployed, when we're operating with our brothers or sisters. Obviously, we only had brothers as Marine infantry, but to your left, and you got these folks to your left and your right, and you don't even really realize how awesome that is and how tight you become until you get out, and you don't necessarily have that same sense of team and meaning and closeness. But what I would agree, I think where I have found an even higher meaning is through my relationship with God and in the fellowship with others who share the same faith in Christ. But you just talked. First of all, congratulations! It sounds like you got a new job you're going to be sliding into next year.
Yeah.
Or this at the end of this year. Does that mean you guys are moving from Texas to North Carolina?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting trip.
Okay.
15 hours for my baby girl is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
My wife will need lots of prayers. But yeah, because I was teaching for 5 years, and just wasn't feeling like I was making a big difference.
Mm.
And my heart wasn't in it anymore. And, this is the first year that I've not been teaching, but I've been full-time focused on coaching, and it's been great, and I love it.
Yeah.
So my wife is supportive, and we're very excited for this new adventure in our lives.
Mm-hmm. What will you be teaching and or coaching there?
I'm going to be coaching the swim team at the Gardner Webb University.
Oh, right on. Okay.
You may recognize the name from the NCAA basketball tournament. They have a really good basketball program.
Okay.
Their coach reached out to me. I got an interview, and I've accepted the job. And
that's great.
I will be moving the second week in August out to Boiling Springs, North Carolina.
Now, I have to admit, I don't know where that is, and I know where Camp Lejeune is, and I know where the Asheville area is further to the west. Where's the university?
I'm pretty sure it's over to the west. It's about an hour west of Charlotte.
Okay.
And close to the Tennessee border and South Carolina.
So yeah. That's a beautiful part of the state, I think.
It is, yeah. It really is, and I'm excited for 4 seasons, not just cold and hot here in Texas.
Yeah, I agree with you. I kind of miss that myself, growing up in the Boston area. Do you have any particular? You talked a bit about your family. You talked a bit about faith, just your own way of processing through trauma. Do you have any other resources that you have used or that you'd like to share with others?
Um, I'm blessed that I'm in an area where they are very veteran friendly.
Mm.
For example, right down the street from me, there's a huge athletic complex with, 10 baseball fields, like 8 football fields. It's huge. And they have it's called Veterans Park. And inside the park, they have pavilions, that have names of different battles and, the history of different things that were going on in the United States. And it's really cool that they also have a wall that has the names of veterans from the area on it. And it's cool to bring my son there or my wife or my daughter there and show them, like, there's my name on this wall. I can say, I was a part of something.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. There's a great outreach program within Bryan College Station, but also I'm blessed that I went to Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a very veteran-friendly organization. Actually, that's where the current 2-7 battalion commander went to school. He was actually in the ROTC program. He was running the ROTC program there.
Okay.
So the resources I had really helped me build relationships with other veterans. Mm-hmm. Just got me to be more outgoing and wanting to be a part of something else than just being a veteran.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. One last question. You asked, you didn't ask. I asked you about some of the ways that 2-7 is or is not forgotten and how we continue to tell our story. And you mentioned doing interviews for books. Do you know of any of our guys? I know of a couple of guys that have talked about writing books. Do you know of any guys that are in the middle of actively writing something to kind of catalog our history?
There is one that's already been written. He's going to kill me that I can't remember his name.
Okay.
Terry McGowan.
Yeah, Terry McGowan. Okay.
Yeah, he wrote a book, so that's really cool to show others. And then I actually have other book, the one that I'm actually in, that I was interviewed for. It's called After Combat.
Okay.
It's true war stories from Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's a collection of stories. It doesn't have our names on it, but it's the English professor at A&M brought in veterans, and they told their story.
Okay.
And and they're all anonymous stories. But I mean, I know where I'm at. I know what I said. But it's really cool to read that. And I've been writing a book on and off. When I say I've been writing a book, I've been writing on paper and typing in the computer. Every once in a while I get a wild hair up my butt and I want to start writing things down a little more. But, there are probably others that are wanting to write stuff. It's just, will it ever get published?
Right.
It's been 10 years since I was a Marine.
Yeah.
Crazy to think about that.
Yeah.
10 years in August, I was a Marine. I've been out longer than I was in. So, and the older we get, probably the more stories will come out. Those stories will not be as true as when we were as close. I mean, the only ones that I'm a history major, so I've talked to a lot of professors that have written World War II history books, and they say one of the things that always sticks out to me is, if you're going to interview a veteran, bring their wife around, because
nice.
The wife will be the one that'll smack them and say that you're telling a fib, or because they've heard the story 1,000 times and they know when you're embellishing it. So, I guess the more removed we get from it, the more our stories will change.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who else is writing stuff.
Yeah.
If they are, great, keep writing, but be prepared for nobody to want to read it.
A little dose of brutal honesty there. That's good.
I mean, that's true. I mean, the further we get away from war,
the
less people want to read about it.
Yeah. Well,
I
I don't
mean,
know. I mean, think about all the movies that came out about World War II, even well after, even decades after World War II. And granted, it's a different war. People have a different kind of enchantment with it. The more, and that's part of it too. I think the more removed you get from it, people remember it a different way than the veterans remember it.
yeah,
Uh, D-Day was a bloody, horrible, uh, day for a lot of guys who went through it. Obviously, a great victory, a key turning point in the war in Europe. But again, I think we all watch like Saving Private Ryan and movies like that with sort of this sense of awe and enchantment. And I guarantee you, there was no sense of enchantment for any of the guys on Omaha Beach that day.
right.
So who knows? It could the distance could work sort of to our advantage in getting the stories out there at the same time. We'll
Yeah,
see.
it could. I mean, but we do owe it to our children and our great grandchildren to have a recorded history
Yeah,
of what we did. Only history will be able to tell, what that looks like.
yeah,
Will they really even care as much as we did? I mean,
yeah.
who knows? So, I mean, if they are writing it, great. Uh, don't expect it to be on the New York Times bestsellers list
Right.
because we've been. I mean, as a civilian now, people are tired of war. They're
Yeah.
tired of hearing about these conflicts, and they hear the same thing day in and day out. But they forget how they felt when it was September 11th,
That's right.
when shock and awe happened, um, when Osama bin Laden was killed. They forget those feelings, and I think we need to. Every once in a while, we need a little shock and a remembrance of what things were really like
Yeah.
during those dark days in history.
Yeah. Yeah. That Marine I was telling you about earlier, that was with Fifth Marines. He said he was on patrol the day that Osama bin Laden was killed, and they came over the radio and mentioned it to everybody. And he said he had the hardest time not just shouting, how satisfying, how exciting that was, just to have somebody who created so much devastation and fueled so much hate to be gone, to be finally taken out of taken out. Well, Travis, is there anything I may have missed that you would like to share or you'd like to talk about?
I think I've gotten everything off my
All
chest
right.
that you wanted to know. I mean, I don't have regrets on what I tell people because it's great that people ask questions, and I think veterans really need to be more receptive to sharing this story because if you're always bottling things in, just
Yeah,
like emotions, when they do come out, it's going to be in most likely a negative way.
yeah,
So I mean, even with like the swimmers, they're like, some of them have been like, "Have you killed anybody?" And I tell them the truth, and right then and there, and they're like, then I just show them that I'm getting back to a life where I'm not a Marine. I'm doing something completely different. Yeah, that was a job that I had, but it's not something that totally defines every waking minute of the day.
yeah.
You know?
That's right.
So, I mean, that's just something that if people want to know things about veterans and want to know what war is like, just ask. I mean, and I think as veterans, we owe that to them, the people that we actually serve, and to ourselves. We owe them and us an explanation for what things were like.
Yeah,
I think that's only fair. I mean, if you think about it, everybody's tax dollars is going to all those rounds I shot from the M27.
right.
If they want to know something about what I did in the Marine Corps, I have an obligation to answer that
Yeah,
because they helped us out.
right,
So,
right. Well, it's great to see your smile again. You've got
yeah,
probably one of the most memorable smiles of anybody in the Marine Corps.
yeah,
And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your story, talk about how you've been continuing to process through what you went through and how you've grown through it continue to move forward through it. So thanks, Travis.
Yeah.
Obviously, your story will continue to be told both in that book that you just shared and in this interview. And who knows, we may have some more books or even a movie coming out about 2-7 sometime in the near future. So thanks a ton. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for what you're doing as well, sir. It's definitely going to make an impact.
All right, brother. All right. We'll talk soon.
Yes, sir.